All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is the Module 3 video. And again, these videos, the purpose of them are really to just give an overall summary of everything we went over on the in-person class. So if you happen to not be able to make it, this is another good resource for you. Or if you wanted to come back and take a look at some of the topics we discussed during that class, and again, another really great resource. So Module 3, here we go. So Module 3 is really talking about fueling your body the right way and balancing the different nutrients. And I know we already sort of touched on this with Module 2 with my plate guidelines and portion sizes and things like that. But now we're going to take a dive deeper into what are the differences between the different categories of the different macronutrients, which are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So for the carbohydrate section, we'll be talking about simple versus complex carbs. For the fat section, we'll be talking about the difference between unsaturated fats, saturated fats, and trans fats. And then for protein, we'll be talking about animal-based protein versus plant-based protein. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys so you can all look at the graphics. Hopefully this is a little more informative than last week. I know I only kind of held them up to the screen, so hopefully this works better this week doing it this way. So let me quickly share the screen and bring up the module pages here. All right, so here we have Module 3, the overview, and this is really where I wanted to start. So for balancing your macros, I want to talk more about the proportions that each of these should be in your diet. So daily percentage macronutrient breakdown, and that graph is really highlighting how many daily calories should come from each different macronutrients. So for carbohydrates, which again is your body's #1 source of fuel, should be the most at 45 to 65% of your daily caloric intake. For your fats, just a little section there. And if you look at how many calories are in a gram of each macro chart, you see that fats are 9 calories per 1 gram. So they have the most calories per 1 gram compared to the other macronutrients, proteins and carbohydrates. So your diet really only needs to encompass 20 to 35% of fat, and then 10 to 35% of your daily calories should come from protein. And again, we're going to dive a little deeper and break each of those down for you. So let's start off and talk about the carbohydrates here. So for carbohydrates, again, #1 source of energy for your body, your brain's #1 source of fuel for that part of your body. So carbs, again, are not the enemy. They're very important to sustaining life and fueling your body properly. So again, as I mentioned previously, we're going to break down the examples of simple carbohydrates versus complex carbohydrates. And for simple carbohydrates, these are really going to be your body's quick source of energy. And these are the types of carbohydrates that I was talking about that you should get before a workout. Now, I know the simple carbohydrates that I mentioned here are things like candy, processed food like cookies, white bread, and juice. And although those may not be, the most healthful options, those are just examples. Another or a better source of simple carbohydrates would be fruit, for example. Fruit like apples, bananas, cantaloupe, watermelon, things like that. Those are going to be natural sugars. And again, an example of a simple carbohydrate that your body can utilize quickly, which is why you want to incorporate those before your workout. Second category here are complex carbohydrates, and those are different carbohydrates that have more fiber in them. And the fiber is harder to for your body to break down and utilize, which is why this is the long-lasting energy. It really helps maintain your body's energy stores, and this is what's going to keep you going throughout the day. So good examples of complex carbohydrates: beans, legumes, sweet potatoes, oatmeals, whole grains, whole wheat bread, whole wheat pasta, brown rice, things like that that have the fiber in them. And again, those are gonna, keep your energy at a level there where it's not up and down, where if you had your diet consisting of mostly simple carbohydrates, that's what's going to happen. It'll be sort of like a roller coaster. But with the complex carbohydrates, it's going to keep your energy levels level throughout the day. So just a quick piece there on those. And again, 45 to 65% of your daily calories should come from carbohydrate sources. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about fats. And again, fats are one of those categories of nutrients that gets a bad rep in the fitness world, the wellness world, things like that. And I'm here to not to tell you, you can't have any of these except for trans fats, but we'll get into that. But really, balancing the type of fats that you have in order to provide your body with the best sources of fats. And really, those are going to be the unsaturated fats. Now, unsaturated fats, there are two categories, which are monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, and that goes into like carbon counts and science and chemistry and all that stuff that we're not going to get into today. But just, so you have a little knowledge of that. So for the monounsaturated fats, those are going to be things like avocados, nuts, canola oil, olive oil, and that's where you're going to get your omega-3 fatty acids from. And as you probably know, omega-3 fatty acids are considered heart healthy. They help increase your good cholesterol, decrease your bad cholesterol, lower your cholesterol in general. They're also good for brain development in kids, and they have all these other really great benefits, and they're found in things like salmon, mackerel, flaxseed, canola oil, walnuts. So that's where your monounsaturated fats are going to come from in those omega-3s. Polyunsaturated fats, another type of unsaturated fat. And again, those are going to come from flaxseed oil, safflower oil, soybean oil, things like that. And your unsaturated fats, those are going to be liquid at room temperature. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever noticed on a food label that you see the word hydrogenated oils. And that can be a little bit confusing because now you're thinking, oh, oil, oh, liquid at room temperature, that must be a saturated or an unsaturated good fat. But the reality is they're actually oils that a hydrogen was added to make them a saturated fat. So that's something to look out in food labels and try to avoid those hydrogenated oils. And that kind of leads into the trans fat, which is really a man-made fat. Trans fats do not exist in nature. You will not find them in, those sources that I talked about with the unsaturated fats. These are going to be things like margarine and those hydrogenated oils that I was telling you about. And the only reason trans fats exist are because back during the World Wars, the government was using butter for a whole bunch of different reasons. They were giving them to the troops, to utilize in their diets and other things like that. So there was a butter shortage. So really the government said, we need to find an alternative. Boom, margarine was born. But now they're really saying that those trans fats, they're really not healthy for consumption. And the FDA has been doing a really good job in trying to eliminate those in all of our processed foods, but they're still there. Sometimes, again, like I said, margarine is an example of trans fat, so just something to look out for and to recognize that these are no longer considered healthy to consume. And then the last category over here are saturated fats. And saturated fats mostly come from animal sources, but there can be saturated fat in some plant sources as well, which I listed there. But saturated fats are the type of fat that get the bad rep for raising cholesterol levels, increasing your risk of stroke, diabetes, heart disease, things like that. And that's why the government recommends that you limit your intake to 5 to 6% of your daily caloric intake from saturated fats. And I list some sources here. They'll be found in eggs, dairy, meat, poultry. And then for the plant-based sources, coconut oil and palm oil are really the two most common places where you'll find those in plant-based sources. But that's why the government, the FDA, really highlights the importance of choosing those lean proteins. So like poultry is going to be on the leaner side, like white meat versus dark meat. And also with the red meats, you want to try to find the leaner types in the grocery store. So those 80-20s, that means 80% of it's meat, 20% of it, the calories come from fats. And then for the 90-10, 90% of the calories are the meat and only 10% comes from the fat. So just something else to think of when you are grocery shopping there, looking at the different fat intakes on the food labels, which we're going to talk to you guys about in a little bit. Something that I also really want to highlight here are why fats are essential. And I put that in a little box over there, but they really are. You need fats in your diet for hormone regulation. So hormones not only control your metabolism, they're also important for stress management. For women, especially with estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, all those hormones are regulated by your fat intake. So when you don't have enough fats in your diet, your hormone levels can go all crazy. And I was actually listening to a podcast the other day saying that if you start to yo-yo diet, which is the constant cycle of losing weight, regaining weight, that it really can affect your thyroid. And your thyroid is really your main hormonal regulation or regulator in the body. So it was really interesting. I can post the podcast on the Facebook page. Don't want to get too much into that now, but it was really interesting. And the podcast is all about women nourishing themselves. And obviously, women are different from men, physiologically. So, definitely an importance there to recognize that. But besides hormone regulation, they also help transport fat-soluble vitamins, which are A, E, D, and K. So if you didn't have enough fat in your body, you wouldn't have a means of transporting these essential nutrients to your different cells, keeping you, flourishing and functioning. And, vitamin A is really important for your eye health. Vitamin D is really important for, maintaining your calcium levels, which is especially important for women as we're at a higher risk, especially after menopause, for cardiovascular disease and things like that. Vitamin E and vitamin K are also, they help regulate, your circulation and blood clotting and things like that. So if we didn't have enough fat in our body to transport those, our body wouldn't be able to utilize that. And so we wouldn't be able to maintain that homeostasis. It also, like I said, regulates metabolism with those satiety hormones. And satiety is really that feeling of fullness. So they also help regulate that in the body as well. So fats are good for you, but like I said, not all fats are created equally. So making sure that most of the fats that you consume are unsaturated is really, really key. All right, moving on to protein. So for protein, this is probably the only nutrient that doesn't get, whacked by the health and wellness industry. And this really is because it's important for repairing and building muscle, especially after a workout. So when you work out, your muscles are actually tearing the little muscle fibers that are in there. And when, you eat right, get enough sleep, get enough protein in your diet, that's when your muscles are able to build and repair themselves and make them stronger. So that's why protein is really crucial, especially after your workout. You want to try to get some protein into you at least 20 to 30 minutes after your workout, when your muscles really need it and are going to be able to absorb it and utilize it the most efficient way. So With that being said, too much of a good thing can also be harmful. So your body can only metabolize or utilize 20 to 30 grams of protein at a time. So that's something to keep in mind. And for those of you who aren't in a healthcare field, your kidneys are essential for, you know, filtering that protein. And when you get too much, it can, you know, cause damage to your kidneys, can start having protein in your urine, which really isn't a good thing. I mean, there's other things that go into that, but, you know, physiologically, that's what can happen. So really trying to limit 20 to 30 grams of protein at one meal or one snack is really crucial. And the recommended daily allowance for protein intake is really only 50 to 60 grams per day. So just something else to keep in mind. Now, I also wanted to touch upon the different types of proteins, and this is animal-based proteins and plant-based proteins. So for the animal-based proteins, obviously they come from animals. So these are things like eggs, dairy, chicken, fish, as well as your red meats. So, you know, pork and ground beef, things like that. Those are animal-based proteins. And, you know, I mentioned before that you want to make sure you're getting the leaner cuts of these proteins, you know, to decrease the saturated fat consumption for yourselves. But red meats really do have a lot of beneficial nutrients as well as other animal-based proteins. So, for example, B12 and heme iron, which is a red, like the iron that is most bioavailable in your body, which means that your body can utilize it the best. That's going to be found in red meats and those types of animal-based proteins. B12 is not found in plant-based sources, which is why a lot of vegetarians have to supplement B12. But B12 is really important for your energy levels, and iron is really important, again, for your energy levels, especially as women. We tend to run lower in iron. So, you know, having a hamburger, having a steak every once in a while, as long as it's, you know, focused on the lean side, you know, can definitely be a good thing for you. It also has, like dairy, for example, has good amounts of calcium in there, vitamin D, and then zinc is readily found in fish. And what they found, especially with the coronavirus going on, they found that zinc is actually a really important nutrient for immunity. So definitely the more you can get of that at this moment is beneficial. So just something to mention and know about the animal-based proteins. Now for the plant-based proteins, these are really what the health and wellness industry are pushing. Obviously, plants are natural, and there's, you know, a lot of them, right? So the plant-based proteins, in having a mainly plant-based diet, has been found to decrease your risk for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, high cholesterol, risk of stroke, even some like Alzheimer's disease and things like that. So there's a lot of research, you know, that has come out and that probably will come out to continue to focus on this plant-based style of eating. So for the plant-based options, you know, these are things, again, like beans, nuts, legumes. So that's why I have a picture of all those nuts and grains and the nut butter there. So, you know, those are really important. It's also important to know that your vegetables actually have a little bit of protein in them. Your fruits with a covering, so like an apple or a skin, I guess is a better word. So fruits with skins also have some protein in there, just a little bit, usually around like 2 grams per serving. Quinoa, which is a grain, that's pretty high in protein as well. So don't think that if you eat, you know, mostly plant-based, you can't get enough protein, because it is there. And there are a lot of, like I said, very beneficial reasons to eat mostly plant-based. So that is what I have to say about that. And last but not least, we're just going to talk a little bit about the food label. And I had this picture here from the FDA website, and